Welcome to another special conversation. Actually, it's a monologue. So we've gone through the first days of Yontif. We've gone through the Chol HaMoed. Now we're going to celebrate the last days, which is known as Shvi Shel Pesach and Achron Shel Pesach. It's the seventh day of Pesach and the final day of Pesach. Interestingly, it's not called the eighth day, like in Sukkot. It's the seventh day and then the final day, because final is a reference to Mashiach. The conclusion of history, the world becoming what it's meant to be, all evil being dissolved and discontinued. It's Achrin, like Achris Hayomim. Like the end of days, this is the end day of Pesach. So let's look at each of them for a minute. What is unique about the seventh day of Pesach is that that's the day in which we experience the miracle of the splitting of the sea. And the obvious question, which we should all ask, the Jews needed to go to Mount Sinai. Wasn't there some other way they could go to avoid the problem with the sea? As people are now saying, it's the Gulf of Aqaba. Wasn't there another way for them to get through or past or over the water without the water splitting and becoming dry land? Why this particular miracle? Of course, you can ask that about every miracle. Why manna from heaven? Isn't there some other way God could feed the people? So every miracle has its meaning and its reason. The miracle of the splitting of the sea was necessary. It was a preparation for the receiving of the Torah. And what it symbolizes, or what it suggests, is that the sea, where all the creatures of the ocean, the fishes, are submerged within the water, you don't see them. All you see is the water. You have to go into their world. You have to enter the water in order to see the creatures of the ocean, of the sea. Which means that the creatures of the sea are always attached, dependent, loyal to the source of their lives, because they live from the water. Creatures of the land are not always that loyal to their source, which is the earth. We sometimes take a boat and go down to sea. We sometimes take a plane and fly through the air. We leave terra firma. So this represents a difference between creatures with free choice, who can sometimes stray from their source, from their purpose, versus the creatures of the sea, who are always loyal to their place of life, their source of life. They stay in their source. And that is the difference between the perfect tzaddik and the average person. The perfect tzaddik is so connected to his source, so connected to godliness, he never strays. Not in action, not in speech, and not in thought. So the creatures of the sea are generally used as a metaphor for the tzaddik. The ocean itself represents the hidden side of creation. There's the revealed part of creation, the part we know, we're familiar with. And then there are the mysteries and the secrets of creation. There's the part of Torah that we know, we're familiar with, we can all read it. And then there are the parts of Torah that are mysterious, the inner secret parts of Torah. There are parts of the soul that we are familiar with. And then there are parts of the soul that we don't get to see. Experiencing the splitting of the sea literally meant that everyone experienced the revelation of things hidden. When the sea turns into dry land, the mysteries of the sea become as apparent and as vivid as dry land. Which means that all the people experienced a level of holiness that only the greatest tzaddik could otherwise experience. So that even the simplest person who experienced that miracle saw godliness in a way that even the greatest of prophets did not see. So it was an introduction to godliness that prepared the people for the receiving of the Torah. God had to become real before God can tell us what he needs. Because if he just came and gave us the Torah, we would be wondering, who is this? Who is this God who is giving us all this information and all these details and mitzvahs? So first we had to encounter God himself. And that's why it says that at the splitting of the sea, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdei, they gained a real and graphic belief in God and in Moshe that made them able to relate to God when God spoke to them at Mount Sinai. So that is the miracle of the splitting of the sea. Now, every year on the seventh day of Pesach, we are invited to experience that same revelation, that same inspiration, as if we were there. And that's what celebrating a holiday is really all about. It's reliving. It's an opportunity to re-experience those same feelings, those same insights, and that same inspiration and wonder. So on the seventh day of Pesach, beginning tonight, the gates of heaven are open. The waters are divided. The secrets are revealed. And if we ask, and if we want, we can tap into that and come away inspired, enlightened, wiser, refined, closer to godliness. And it's a gift from heaven. Usually that is acquired through a lot of hard work, a lot of self-discipline, a lot of Torah study, a lot of prayer. But on the seventh day of Pesach, it's a gift. God splits the sea. God makes it all available. We just have to accept it. We have to want it, and we have to receive it graciously. So tonight, when we invite the Yom Tov in, when you light the candles, when you daven, and when you have the meal, the Yom Tov meal, ask God to allow you to feel what the people felt at the splitting of the sea. That's the seventh day of Pesach. The eighth day of Pesach is really, really special because it's not related so much to what happened in the past. It is more of a focus on what's happening in the future, the coming of Mashiach. the previous Rebbe's father, 3 generations ago, who started the first Chabad yeshiva, where Hasidus was studied alongside with the Gemara, he revealed to his students that on the 8th day of Pesach, we should celebrate the anticipation of Mashiach by actually making a special meal, Sudas Mashiach. And this was for the students of the yeshiva, that they should drink 4 cups of wine, have a little matzah, and that is celebrating the coming of Mashiach. In other words, we anticipate it so realistically that we're already having a meal for that occasion. So very practically, on the night of the conclusion of Yom Tov, you sit down, you have a cup of wine, you make a bracha on it, you drink it, you sing a Hasidic song, you study a Hasidic text, you repeat a Hasidic story, then you have your second cup, you say l'chaim, you don't make another bracha, you say l'chaim, you drink the second cup, and then you sing a song or study something, you make a break between the cups, and you do this 4 times. And this is a physical expression of the anticipation, not the belief in Mashiach, but the anticipation of Mashiach. Let's talk a minute about Mashiach. What we know about Mashiach, without any doubts or uncertainties, is what Rambam tells us in the laws of Mashiach. Very interestingly, the Rambam begins the section on Mashiach by saying, when a Jewish leader, a Jewish teacher, a leader comes along who is like David, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, and accomplishes certain things, we can assume that he is Mashiach. If he succeeds in those things, then he is Mashiach. Which is a strange way of introducing a law. These are the laws of Mashiach. This is a halacha book. The Rambam is telling us what we're obligated to do. You would expect the introduction to be, we are obligated to believe in the coming of Mashiach, or it is a mitzvah to believe in the coming of Mashiach. Something that sounds like a law, which is the way he wrote all the other mitzvahs in his work on halacha. 14 volumes. And here, all of a sudden, there's no mention of a law, of a mitzvah, of a commandment, of an obligation. Almost sounds like he's describing a situation. But where is the commandment? What are we obligated to do? So it turns that there really is no mitzvah to believe in the coming of Mashiach. As Rambam will say, if you don't believe in the coming of Mashiach, then you are denying the entire Torah. Because everywhere in Torah, the coming of Mashiach is mentioned. Certainly in the prophets, but even in the 5 books of Moses, even in the Chumash, there is mention of the coming of Mashiach. So if you don't believe in Mashiach, then you're saying that the Torah is not true. So what do we have from that? There is no mitzvah to believe in Mashiach. But if you don't believe in Mashiach, you have no mitzvahs at all. Because you don't believe in the entire Torah. So why do we believe in Mashiach? Because we believe in Torah. And if Torah says that it's going to happen, then it has to happen. One of the reasons that it has to happen is because Torah is eternal. And the Torah says that there are 613 commandments that we are meant to keep forever and ever and ever. However, today, as we are in exile and in Golus, of the 613 commandments, we are capable, it is possible to observe only 270. The rest are dependent on having a king, having a sovereignty, having all Jews in Israel. Of the mitzvahs cannot be performed, may not be performed. You certainly can't offer sacrifices outside of the temple. The Rambam says, even though that's not true, but the Rambam furthers the argument and says there is actually a mitzvah in the Torah that we never fulfilled. And that cannot be, it can't remain unfulfilled. And that's reason enough to know for sure that Mashiach must come. What is that mitzvah? It's the mitzvah of setting aside cities of refuge. The Torah says that when your borders will be expanded, you will create more cities of refuge. And that has never yet happened. And since nothing in the Torah can be in vain, that mitzvah too must be fulfilled. And in order for it to be fulfilled, Mashiach must come. If you take it in a larger picture, the reason we believe in Mashiach is because we believe in Torah. And if you don't believe in Mashiach, then you're denying the entire Torah. Technically, you're denying the entire Torah because there's a mitzvah that needs to be performed, or all the mitzvahs that we're not performing today need to come back. But in the bigger picture, if you don't believe in Mashiach, then you don't believe in anything. Meaning to say like this. The big picture that the Torah gives us is that God created this world, the lowest of all possible creations. And why did he create it? Because he wants this lowest world to become the highest world, like completing a circle. And the way that happens is through our performance of mitzvahs. Every mitzvah we introduce into the world, every mitzvah we perform or speak or think, brings that plan closer to its fruition. It's like a king who tells the people that there's a mountain in the capital city, a mound or a hill, and there's gold in those hills, in them hills. And anyone who wants can come and borrow tools from the palace and dig in these hills, and the gold that they find, they can keep. So everybody comes running. And they borrow the tools, and there's a gold rush, and everybody is digging and clopping and hacking and chopping until there's no hill left. But there was never any gold. Turns out the king wanted to get rid of the hill. So rather than pay people, he told them that there's gold, and they got rid of the hill for him. But he's an honest man. So he comes with a wagon full of gold from the palace, and he distributes gold to all the people that worked at getting rid of the hill. So everybody's happy. The king got rid of the hill, and the people got gold. you could mistakenly, God forbid, assume that that is the case with God. God says there's gold in this world, the lowest of all worlds. If you borrow my tools, the mitzvahs, and you use them to dig out the gold potential, the godly potential in this world, you will find that gold. But in the end, after 3,332 years of digging, turns out there's no gold. The world is low. The world is a place of evil. It's a place of darkness. There's no gold. But for being good boys and girls, and for working so hard at this plan, Mashiach will come from heaven with wagons of gold and give everybody their reward. So everybody will be happy. God forbid to think that the Torah is simply a ploy. So if you don't believe in Mashiach, you don't believe in the entire Torah. Mashiach means we will find the gold that we are digging out of this earth, out of this planet. If in the end you believe that there will be no gold, then not only don't you believe in Mashiach, you don't believe in the whole plan of creation. So why do we believe in Mashiach so intently? Because that's the whole plan. For 3,000 years, we've been bringing Mashiach to tell us in the end that there is no gold, means that the entire Torah, the revelation at Sinai, God himself was not being honest. A white lie, you can call it a white lie, but God forbid to attribute that to the Torah or to God. So, Rambam makes a very strong statement in the laws of Mashiach, where he says, it should not enter your mind that Mashiach has to perform miracles. Like, how are we going to know that this individual is Mashiach? Oh, he'll perform miracles that'll be very impressive, and then we'll know. Rambam says, not true. Performing miracles does not make you Mashiach. Miracles have been performed throughout history by all sorts of holy people, even by some unholy people. That's not a sign of Mashiach. So Mashiach does not use miracles to impress us or to indicate that he is Mashiach. But Rambam uses such a strong expression, it should not enter your mind. That's at least a little unnecessary. Just simply say Mashiach doesn't have to perform miracles. Possibly the reason that Rambam makes it so strong is because this is the conclusion of 14 volumes of mitzvahs. If at the end of all of this, you believe or you assume that Mashiach will come, will perform miracles, and will make the world better in a miraculous way, that's like saying, there's no gold in this world. We didn't accomplish anything by digging and using the mitzvahs to reveal the potential godliness in this world. There is no godliness in this world. But because we were good boys and girls, Mashiach will come and will make the world better by bringing goodness from heaven, like from the palace, gold from the palace. Meaning supernatural. Nature will never be good. There's no goodness in nature. There's no holiness in earth. But if you're a good boy and girl and you behaved yourself and you sincerely observe the mitzvahs thinking that there's gold in this world, then you deserve a reward. And the reward will come from the other world, from heaven. That would be a miracle. So Rambam says, don't you dare think that in the end, we're going to need a miracle, a supernatural way of becoming good. Because that means we've accomplished nothing in 3,000 years. In other words, by the time Mashiach comes, no miracle will be necessary because nature itself will be holy. You don't need supernatural intervention. So it's not that Mashiach can't perform miracles. Miracles won't be interesting. The earth will be holier than what you can bring from heaven. So the nature of the world will be holier than the supernatural of today. In preparation for that, we have Hasidus. The first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, stated when he became Rebbe, he said, performing miracles is not my thing. The Baal Shem Tov performed miracles all the time. His disciple, third generation, the Alter Rebbe, started Chabad. He said, miracles? No. We have to bring godliness out of nature. The truth has to spring from the earth, not from heaven. Heaven gave us what we need, gave us the Torah, gave us the prophets, gave us the inspiration. But now our job at the end of history is to find the godliness or reveal the godliness that is in the earth, not bring godliness from heaven. There was a woman who came to the Alter Rebbe in Lozhne, and she needed a blessing because her husband was missing, either in the army or at work. He had left town, he never showed up. She had a child who was mute, never spoke. I believe he was 9 years old. The Rebbe was in the middle of a Farbrengen, and of course this is 7 generations ago, and the woman needed to know what to do, so she was advised to send her child to the Rebbe with a note asking for advice or blessing on what to do about her missing husband. The little boy crawled through the crowd and came to the Alter Rebbe, handed him the note. The Rebbe read it and said to the boy, tell your mother that her husband, your father, is in Germany, Leipzig. That's where the large fairs would take place. The boy went back to his mother and said, the Rebbe said that Tati is in Germany. The first time he ever spoke. So afterwards, somebody asked the Alter Rebbe, you said you don't do miracles. And here you performed a miracle. And the Rebbe said, how was I supposed to know the kid can't speak? But when the Rebbe said to him, tell your mother, what the tzaddik decrees, God fulfills. But the point was that miracles was no longer the thing. When somebody needs help and you can do it through a miracle, fine. But the miracle was not the way of inspiring people. It wasn't the way of bringing godliness to the earth, it was time to bring godliness from the earth. So that is the preparation for Mashiach. What are the three conditions that Mashiach has to bring about? The three conditions that are necessary for us to be able to fulfill all the mitzvahs of the Torah. What are those three conditions? Well, first of all, Jews have to be inspired to be Jewish. Secondly, there has to be peace in the world. As long as there are wars, as long as there's anti-Semitism, we can't function normally. It's disruptive. And number three, the earth has to provide so much wealth, the earth meaning creation, the universe. The universe has to provide so much wealth that it shouldn't be necessary to work all day. Because if you have to work all day, you don't have time to fulfill all the mitzvahs. Those are the three conditions. So I asked a rabbi, very pious, very knowledgeable, very studious, you believe in the coming of Mashiach? He says, of course. I said, can you imagine all Jews being excited about Judaism? He says, no. I said, can you imagine the world being at peace, no more anti-Semitism? He says, not in my lifetime. I said, can you imagine people being so wealthy that there's no need to work? Cannot imagine. Well, in that case, your belief in Mashiach is very shallow. To anticipate Mashiach, as Rambam says, meaning it's not enough to believe that he will someday come. You actually have to anticipate. You have to expect him to come today. And if he doesn't come today, you should be disappointed. It should hurt. He could have come today. Why didn't he? So every day that goes by, your anticipation gets stronger. The yearning gets stronger. And the objection to his not coming gets stronger. Another day and he didn't come? After all we've done, 3,332 years of mitzvahs. So there are those people who think they're very smart and they say, well, we also did a lot of sins. Sins get erased constantly. Sins are erased when a person regrets them. Sins are erased when the person who committed the sin passes away. Death itself erases your sin. That's the primary purpose of death, so that the unholiness that you've accumulated falls away. It dies. Then you're forgiven when you go through the experiences in heaven. The soul's painful adjustments, that erases sin. So all the sins of history are pretty much erased. The mitzvahs of history are real and permanent. So after all the mitzvahs and all the tshuva, which erases the sins, Mashiach is still not here. We've already achieved superhuman devotion, superhuman commitment, superhuman loyalty to who we are and who God is and what we're here for. And Mashiach didn't come today. That's not right. So, somebody asked the Rebbe, why did the Rebbe introduce this unprecedented, unheard of demand that we want Mashiach now? Now, Traditionally, people would say, soon, Mashiach should come soon, in my lifetime. I want to live to see Mashiach. But now, that expression was never used before. In other words, they were saying, what is the urgency of now? If someone would tell me that Mashiach is coming in a week, that would be good news. That would be fine. Even 3 weeks, even 3 months gives me time to get my act together. So the Rebbe said, if Mashiach comes a minute from now, that means that 7 billion people or more will be in Golus for another minute. That's 7 billion minutes of human suffering. That's a lot of time, a lot of suffering. Just on the Jewish scene alone, if Mashiach comes in a minute from now, that means that 15 million Jews will have a minute of pain, a minute of suffering, 15 million minutes of Jewish suffering, on top of all that we've already suffered. That's okay? That's acceptable? So if we're thinking only about ourselves, for me, 3 weeks is not bad. But if we think about the bigger picture, a minute from now is a human tragedy, a global tragedy. 7 billion minutes of human suffering. Not even mentioning God's suffering. The Rebbe would often say, God is in Golus, Mashiach is in Golus, the Torah is in Golus, and we are in Golus. To think of God being in Golus for another minute, for God, a minute is an eternity. So we can't be content with Mashiach coming soon. It has to be immediate. Because if we get comfortable with Mashiach coming in 5 minutes, it's a cruelty, a callousness that should not be acceptable. So, although there is no mitzvah to believe in Mashiach and to anticipate his coming, the belief in Mashiach and the anticipation of it is the conclusion of the entire Torah, without which it's like a joke without a punchline. So Mashiach is the fulfillment of all of Torah, not just one particular mitzvah. And that's why Rambam says, in the days of Mashiach, nature will not change. Because if nature has become elevated and perfected and refined and has become more godly than heaven, why do you want it to change? Why do you need it to change? So what will happen when Mashiach comes? 3 things. Jews will be excited to be Jews. Is that a miracle? Not really. The miracle is that there are some Jews who are not excited about being Jewish. That is so unnatural. Maybe not supernatural, but unnatural. That there will be peace, that all human beings will be good and want to serve God. Would that be a miracle? Not really. Someplace deep down inside, everybody wants to be good. Everybody wants peace. Unfortunately, there are people who think that they can bring peace by one more war. Kill just a few more people and there will be peace. And that, of course, never happens. But do they want peace? Yes, they want peace. So it would not be a miracle. And third, that the earth is so rich that we don't have to work. That's how it was before Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. There was no need to work. Everything you needed grew on a tree. Nature provided everything. So without miracles, without canceling nature, without introducing supernatural stuff, the world can be holier and more heavenly than heaven. Those are the three things we need to anticipate and do something about it. So people are talking about a 4-day work week. Can you make a living in 4 days? Yeah. Can you imagine making a living in 1 day? 1 day a week, you go to work, you make enough to live on. Not possible? Not only is it possible, it's practical and necessary to spend your entire day on what enables you to live rather than being involved with life. That sounds a little unnatural. That's like working 12 hours a day for 1 hour of life. Lopsided. We should work 1 hour a day and spend the rest of the day living. That would be normal. So practically speaking, how is this going to happen? That Jews would get excited about being Jewish? Let's just hypothetically. If Israel comes up with a cure, a real cure, not a vaccine, eradicates this thing that has us all scared, and everybody recognizes it's the Jews who did this, might that not change the world's opinion, put an end to anti-Semitism, and bring the world together in a common need for this particular medicine? I'm not predicting this. I'm simply offering one possible scenario where one little event can change the behavior of people from warlike to peace. If the entire world says, the Jews are the chosen people, look at this, we need them to cure us and to help us and to save us, they are really the light to the nations, would all Jews not get excited about being Jewish? And how long does that have to take? With the internet? 20 minutes? 20 minutes and the world is different. And how can the world provide so much wealth that we don't need to work? Well, if you use solar energy, just as an example, if everyone could use the sun for their energy needs, wouldn't everything be so cheap that for $10 you could live an entire year? Or something like that. So none of this is unnatural. None of this is superhuman. In fact, every day that goes by and it doesn't happen is a mystery. One final thought. There are people who have a hard time with the intangible. There's the thought and there's the opinion that if you find a cure to any disease, but you can't explain how it works, then you're not allowed to do it because it's idolatry. It's kishuf, it's magic, it's forbidden. Which is very sad. If we look at the universe, there is tangible and there's the intangible, the material and the immaterial. There's the physical and the spiritual. The metaphysical. Which is natural and which is unnatural. The argument that anything spiritual that you cannot explain, anything mysterious that you cannot see and you can't rationalize is unnatural and therefore idolatrous or magic. That's a sad mistake. There is nothing unnatural about the spiritual. Just a very simple example. Emotions are not tangible. They're not visible. They are matters of the spirit. So it's spiritual. There are things that are more spiritual than the familiar emotions. But that doesn't make them unnatural. They're part of creation. Being able to read another person's mind is not supernatural. It's the nature of thought. Thought is a vibration, thought is a reality, and there are people who can tap into it. Someday we'll have a machine that can tap into it and read your thoughts. It's all part of nature. But in the creation of the world, in nature, God created that which is visible and tangible, the physical, and then also the metaphysical. So brain waves are physical or spiritual. Either way, they're natural. Being able to predict the future is natural. People have premonitions. That's not otherworldly. It's part of nature. Maybe not the most common, but certainly has always been. It's normal, ordinary human beings who have these premonitions. The sixth sense, the paranormal, it's all part of nature. God created heaven and earth. Heaven is a creation. The ruach, that is the human spirit, is the root of the word ruchni or ruchnius, the spiritual. The spirit of life is life. You can't see it, doesn't make it unnatural or supernatural. Nature consists of the visible and the non, the tangible and the non. So when we talk about Mashiach not performing miracles, we're talking about real miracles, supernatural events, not the spiritual part of creation which is available today. So things like energy healing, it's not otherworldly. Energy is what the world is made up of. When it coagulates, it becomes mass. When mass dissolves, it goes back to being energy. That's the physical universe. So the Torah tells us not only on how to elevate the physical, the tangible, it also tells us how to harness the spiritual for purposes of godliness, which means God created the physical and the spiritual for godly purposes. So both heaven and earth need to be elevated to godliness. They both have to be harnessed to serve God's purpose, God's intention, God's will, so that we're elevating the entire universe to godliness. So we have to think of three realities: the physical, tangible, the spiritual, intangible, and the godly. Now we've got a clear picture of what we're all about. So even spiritual things, matters of the spirit, can be evil, can be non-kosher, and they have to be harnessed to godly purpose. So that's how the world is going to reach its perfection. Not only when we do what God says, but anticipate Mashiach, be inspired by the idea. That's the spiritual part. So we have to believe, we have to anticipate, we have to yearn for Mashiach, and we have to get upset when he doesn't come. That's the spiritual side. The physical side is you do another mitzvah. You give another coin to tzedakah. You light another Yom Tov or Shabbos candle. You avoid a non-kosher food. You stop doing some activity that is forbidden on Shabbos, even though you're not keeping the entire Shabbos. Every step, every act, every intention brings godliness out of the earth, because it was all created for godly purpose. So anticipate the coming of Mashiach today, because tomorrow is Yontif. We don't travel on Yontif. It's the time, it's the season. The 8th day of Pesach should no longer be anticipation of Mashiach, but the celebration of Mashiach's arrival. And the world should become what it is meant to be and needs to be and must eventually be. Why not today? Why not? We have an internet. All good news can be shared instantaneously. So let Mashiach come. Let everybody wake up to their own reality. No miracles necessary. And let the world become God's personal, private dwelling place, where he can experience the pleasure of being united with his people, and we will experience the pleasure of being united with him, and the world will be at peace. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. Thank you for helping, and thank you for what you've done and for what you're going to do. Have a wonderful Yontif.